Hi Algebra 2 people. In this video I'd like to talk about domain and range. And in addition to talking about just plain old domain and range, we're going to introduce something called interval notation. And interval notation is pretty darn helpful. But what's confusing about it is it kind of looks like an ordered pair. It's kind of set up similarly. So we want to make sure to make the distinction that these are not coordinates. They are in fact domain and range. So just a little bit of review. Domain is the set of all inputs of a function. Oftentimes our domain is all real numbers. Everything's included. Our range is the set of all outputs of a function. Sometimes it's all real numbers, but other times it's limited, it's restricted as far as the y values that are actually used. Now, what we have here is, on our first example, is an example of a line segment. And what's interesting about this line segment is this coordinate, which appears to be a -1, 3, is a dot, which means you include it. This coordinate at 2, 1 is a circle, which we've learned means you do not include it. So how you would do this the old-fashioned way is you would say for your domain that you're going from the smallest x value is -1 and you're going up to 2, and you could write something like this. X is less than 2 but greater than or equal to -1. You would do a compound inequality because you would include everything in between. And then your range would be, on the lower end of your y values, you'd have a +1. On the upper end, you would have a 3. You'd put y in the middle, and you'd say that it's less than or equal to 3, but greater than 1. And this would give all the information you needed. It's saying you could be -1 on your domain, but you can't be 2. You just go up right up next to it. For your range, you could be 3, y value of 3, but you couldn't be a y value of 1 because there's no equal sign there. Now, this can be a little bit complicated, and somebody thought, well, you know what, we're just going to make a shortened version for this and make sense of this. So instead of writing the compound inequality, somebody said, well, we're just going to use brackets and parentheses to say this. We're really concerned with the start and the finish. So for the domain, we use a bracket for the dot, which means you include it, and a parentheses for the circle, which means you go right up to it, but you don't include it. So it's bracket -1, and then you go up to 2 parentheses. For your range, you're looking at your y values, and your smallest y value is 1. You don't include it, though, so you put a parentheses, and it goes up to 3 with a bracket. So let's try this on our next example here, see how we feel about it. Our domain, again, that's our x values. So we're going to look for our smallest x value. Our smallest x value is -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I write -8. But can I actually be at -8? No. So I put a parentheses. My x values go up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. And because there's a dot there, I put brackets around it, which means we can include 5 in our set of x values. So that's domain is from left to right. Get all those x values. Our range is going to be up and down, our y values. Our smallest y value appears to be -9. -9. Parentheses. My biggest y value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with a bracket. And that tells us everything we need to know about the domain and the range. All right, so we've got a few other practices here. Just practicing using what we just learned. I'll let you fill this in on your own here. Notice on this one, it's circles and circles. You're going to have parentheses all over the place there. This one's dots and dots, so I'm thinking we're going to have brackets everywhere on those. I'll go ahead and I encourage you to try them on your own, but I'll go ahead and write down what the domain and range will be for each of these so you can check, make sure you did it right. Hopefully my key's correct because I'm not double checking it. Domain and range. Domain and range. All right. Well, let's move on to something a little different here. Instead of segments, we've got lines. And lines extend forever in all directions. So on both of these, actually, our domain is the smallest x value to the biggest x value. Now, because it goes forever in both directions, we would typically say all real numbers and be done. For our range, the y values, because it goes on forever, both directions, we would say all real numbers, and that would cover everything. But in interval notation, we write it differently. We still use the parentheses and brackets sort of set up. But here's what's interesting about it. My smallest x value is actually a number. It's negative infinity. My biggest x value, because this is going to go on to the right forever, my biggest x value is positive infinity. And here's the interesting part. Do we put a bracket or do we put a parentheses? Well, because we can never actually get to infinity, at least this is my justification for it, because we can never actually place our pen on infinity, we use parentheses when we do all real numbers, negative infinity to infinity. The y values, smallest value is negative infinity, biggest value is positive infinity. And that's true for both of these graphs because the arrows are going on both ends. Forever up, forever down, forever right, forever left. It's got everything covered. Okay, now here's what you're going to likely see on our test. You're going to graph an absolute value graph, and then from there, you're going to be asked to write domain and range. Well, the domain for this first one, because of these arrows going forever to the left, forever to the right, your domain is going to be all real numbers, but we're going to expect you to write it using interval notation, negative infinity to positive infinity. But check out our range. Our range does not go forever downward. The lowest value for our range, the lowest value is -2. From -2, we go up forever. So the old way of doing it is to say y is greater than or equal to -2. But with interval notation, you do it this way. You say your smallest value is -2, and because it goes up forever, you say infinity. Now we know to put a parentheses with the infinity, but what are we going to do at this -2? Well, it turns out that if there's no circle drawn, you know that you're actually including that coordinate. That coordinate's the vertex. The vertex has a dot at it. So we go bracket negative 2 to infinity. Now I'm going to stop writing the old school way of doing interval notation, and on the rest of these we're just going to do interval notation. So for our domain on this one, forever to the left, forever to the right. Our range, the smallest value, the smallest y value is 3, bracket, and we're going up to infinity. And I encourage you to try the next two on your own. I'll go ahead and write the answers, but try them on your own. On this last one, notice it's pretty steep, but it's still going to go forever to the left, forever to the right. Now, sometimes when people get in a hurry on these last two, they'll flip-flop the range. They'll say, oh, it's going 2 to negative infinity. But you always, with interval notation, want to do the smallest number first. So you're going to think of it as my lowest y value is negative infinity, and I'm going up to 2. My lowest value is negative infinity on the y's. I'm going up to 1. So please notice the orientation, or the order that we write that. All right, now you're not going to see this. You're not going to graph one of these yourself, but you can certainly write the domain and range. On this one, it's an absolute value graph kind of on its side. The domain, my smallest x value is going to be negative infinity, but my biggest x value is 2. So I say negative infinity up to 2. For my range, I'm going to go forever down, forever up. So I'm going to say negative infinity to infinity. It's kind of flip-flopped, isn't it? My smallest x value is 1. My biggest x value is infinity. My smallest y value is negative infinity. Biggest is positive infinity. Negative infinity to infinity, or all real numbers. Hey, thank you so much for watching. From here on out, when we do our study guides, you'll be asked to include domain and range on your study guide. You'll get some more practice with that. Thanks so much for watching.